History can be rewritten by treasures lost at sea. The discovery of Bronze Age shipwrecks has completely overturned our view of the ancient world, revealing a sophisticated global network that thrived 3,000 years ago. These underwater time capsules, known as the Shipwreck Archives, provide undeniable proof of complex trade and cultural exchange that challenge everything we thought we knew. By the end of this, you will understand how a handful of sunken ships redrew the map of human history. What could cause a vessel laden with royal gold to vanish into the deep, and what forgotten stories do its cargo hold? How connected was our world in an age we assumed was simple? What does this lost chapter of globalization tell you about our own interconnected world today? For centuries, the map of the Bronze Age world was drawn with vast, empty spaces between its great kingdoms. We pictured mighty Egypt, the formidable Hittites, and the palace citadels of the Mycenaeans as isolated powers, each reigning over their own separate domains. The prevailing image was one of simple, inward-looking societies. This view, however, was a mirage created by the limits of our own evidence. Our understanding was built almost entirely from the ruins on land, from crumbling palaces and cryptic clay tablets that offered only whispers of diplomacy and war. The Mediterranean Sea itself was seen as a formidable void, a dangerous and uncrossable barrier that kept these early cultures apart, but the truth was waiting beneath the waves. The creation of bronze itself held the first clue to this grander reality. To make bronze, you need both copper and tin, two metals that are almost never found in the same place. Copper might come from Cyprus, while tin had to travel from as far away as Afghanistan or Central Europe. This simple fact of metallurgy meant that from its very beginning, the Bronze Age could not have existed without long-distance trade. The sea was not a barrier at all, but the very glue that held this entire world together. It was a superhighway for ancient mariners, a fact we completely missed until we started looking in the right place. The discovery of the first major shipwreck would shatter the old picture forever, forcing us to redraw the map of antiquity entirely. The seabed off the Turkish coast held a secret for 3,000 years until a single chance discovery brought it to light. A sponge diver named Kemal Aras was working in the clear waters near Cape Gelidonya when he saw something unusual resting on the bottom. It was not a natural rock formation, but a pile of strange, pitted metal ingots, their distinctive shapes weathered by centuries of seawater. This was not just an interesting find, it was the spark that would ignite an entirely new field of science. The year was 1960, and this site would become the very first ancient shipwreck to be excavated in its entirety using proper archaeological methods. The man who led this pioneering effort was a young American archaeologist named George Bass. He and his team faced a monumental task, developing the techniques of underwater archaeology as they went along. They had to learn how to map a site without traditional landmarks, how to carefully remove centuries of sediment, and how to preserve artifacts that had been submerged for millennia. What they uncovered was a time capsule from around 1200 BC, a small merchant vessel no bigger than a modern fishing boat. Its cargo was the story of its journey, a hold filled primarily with copper and tin ingots, the raw materials for making bronze. This was the first tangible, physical proof of the metal trade that textbooks had only theorized. The ship itself told a personal story. Alongside the ingots were the crew's personal belongings, stone weights for a balance scale, and a collection of tools, suggesting these men were not just sailors but also metalsmiths, ready to repair or trade their skills in foreign ports. Perhaps the most revolutionary finding was the ship's origin. Analysis pointed not to a great Mycenaean Greek kingdom, but to the Levant, the coast of the ancient Near East. This single fact shattered the dominant historical narrative. It proved that long-distance maritime trade was not a monopoly controlled by palace bureaucracies. Instead, it revealed a world of independent, entrepreneurial merchants, small crews piloting their vessels across the open sea, connecting cultures in a network of commerce that was far more complex and decentralized than anyone had dreamed. The Cape Gelidonya wreck was the proof of concept. It demonstrated that the seafloor was not a graveyard but a pristine archive, and it challenged a generation of scholars to start looking deeper. The Uluburun shipwreck made the Gelidonya find look like a modest preliminary sketch. Discovered in 1982 off the dramatic coast near Kaş, Turkey, this was not merely another merchant vessel. It was a floating palace, a veritable treasure chest that sank around 1300 BCE, carrying the entire economy of the Bronze Age in its hold. The sheer scale and diversity of its cargo was staggering, a collection so rich it forced every history book to be rewritten. Here was 10 tons of raw copper ingots, shaped like stretched ox hides for easy transport, stacked alongside a full ton of precious tin. Mixed in were raw materials from the known world, gleaming glass ingots, dark ebony logs from tropical Africa, hippopotamus and elephant tusks, and even delicate ostrich eggshells, likely intended to be decorated and turned into luxury cups. This was not a simple trade run, it was a delivery of epic proportions. The ship itself was a microcosm of a connected world, its artifacts pointing to at least 7 distinct cultures, from Canaanite storage jars to Mycenaean pottery, Cypriot tools, and Mesopotamian cylinder seals. It was a floating United Nations of the ancient world, but the most personal link to history was a small, solid gold scarab seal, intricately carved with the name of one of Egypt's most famous and enigmatic queens, Nefertiti. This single piece of jewelry tied the entire shipment directly to the highest echelons of Egyptian royalty, suggesting this was either a royal gift, a state-sponsored shipment, or a merchant operating with the pharaoh's blessing. Suddenly, the abstract idea of long-distance trade had a royal face and a precise historical moment. The Uluburun ship forces us to ask a deeply human question. Who were the people aboard this cosmopolitan vessel, a crew that likely included men from across the Mediterranean, sailing with a king's ransom in their hull? They were the original global citizens, navigating by the stars across treacherous seas, their lives and fortunes dependent on the winds and the waves. Their personal story ended in tragedy, but their sunken cargo tells a triumphant tale of a world far more globalized than we ever believed possible. Each piece of cargo recovered from these sunken archives tells a specific story of origin and destination. The copper ingots, with their distinctive stretched oxhide shape, were a standardized form of ancient currency, a design optimized for easy handling and stacking on a ship's back. Scientific analysis confirms that the vast majority of this copper came from the island of Cyprus, a fact that transforms this place from a mere dot on the map into the primary copper factory of the entire Bronze Age world. Yet copper is only one half of the recipe for bronze. The tin needed to alloy with it presented a far greater logistical challenge. Trace elements point to sources incredibly far inland, likely from the distant mountains of Afghanistan. Just think of the journey that tin had to take, mined in Central Asia, carried by caravan across deserts and mountains, and finally loaded onto a ship to sail the Mediterranean. This means a single bronze sword represented a supply chain that spanned continents, but the cargo holds contained more than just raw metal. amber beads from the cold Baltic Sea rested alongside elephant tusks from the heart of Africa. Perfumed oils were stored in beautiful pottery from Mycenaean Greece, and Canaanite jars once held olives and wine. This was not merely a shopping list of random items. It was a curated collection of the most desired luxuries of the age, proving that a demand for exotic goods created a truly globalized marketplace 3,000 years ago. By carefully cataloging the types and quantities of these materials, archaeologists can do more than just list objects. They can reconstruct the entire economic engine of an era. They can trace the invisible highways across the sea, understand which kingdoms were trading partners, and even infer political alliances. This physical evidence powerfully confirms the stories told on ancient clay tablets, like the Amarna letters, which detail a complex system of royal gift exchange between the pharaohs of Egypt and the kings of Babylon and Assyria. The gold, ivory, and fine textiles mentioned in those diplomatic missives were not just poetic boasts, they were the very same goods now being pulled from the seabed. The shipwrecks provide the undeniable, tangible proof, transforming abstract historical concepts into the cold, hard, and wonderful reality of a world connected. The very timbers of the Uluburun ship tell a story of brilliant engineering. This vessel was not merely a hollowed-out log or a simple raft. It was a masterpiece of naval architecture, built using a technique known as shell-first construction. Imagine skilled shipwrights carefully shaping the planks of the hull, edge to edge, and then locking them together with meticulously carved wooden pegs, a method called mortise and tenon joinery. It is the same fundamental principle a master carpenter uses to build a sturdy table or a chair, but scaled up to create a seagoing vessel. This created an incredibly strong and flexible frame, a hull capable of flexing with the punishing force of ocean waves without splintering apart. At about 15 meters long, this ship was a workhorse, engineered to carry a staggering weight of cargo across the unpredictable open sea. Its curved shape was not an accident. It was an ancient understanding of hydrodynamics, a design that allowed it to cut through the water efficiently and remain stable under its heavy load. This was not a boat built for timid coastal hopping. It was a trans-Mediterranean freighter. Recovered artifacts paint a vivid picture of life aboard this vessel. Heavy stone anchors used to hold the ship fast in a sheltered cove were found on the site. Wooden oars provided maneuverability when the winds died down. And perhaps most importantly, evidence points to the use of a brailed sail, a large square sail with a system of ropes that allowed the crew to quickly refit or reduce its area in the face of a sudden squall. This technology gave them a measure of control over the immense power of the wind. With these tools, Bronze Age mariners embarked on voyages that would have been terrifyingly daring. They possessed no compasses, no charts, and no weather forecasts. Their survival depended on a deep, accumulated knowledge passed down through generations, the ability to read the stars for direction at night and to recognize coastal landmarks by day. The very existence of these ships forces us to replace our image of primitive rafts with one of sophisticated technology, and to see these sailors not as amateurs, but as the expert astronauts of their age, navigating a vast and empty sea to connect the continents of the ancient world. But the story of these ships is told not just by their cargo, but by the people who sailed them. The personal items recovered from the wrecks create a vivid portrait of the crew, revealing a remarkably multicultural group traveling the high seas. On the Uluburun ship, a single sailor's kit might have contained a Cypriot drinking cup, a Mycenaean-style sword for protection, a Canaanite oil lamp for light, and an Egyptian amulet for good luck. These were not the belongings of a man from one place, but of a citizen of the ancient world. perhaps the most telling clues are the sets of weights used for measuring value in trade. Archaeologists found not one standard set, but multiple sets calibrated to different systems, Syrian, Mesopotamian, and Egyptian, all on the same ship. This means a merchant had to be fluent in the commercial languages of many lands, converting shekels to deben with the ease of a modern currency trader. It paints a picture of a deck bustling with different languages and customs, a floating marketplace where cooperation was essential for survival and profit. These were not anonymous figures lost to time. They were individuals with personal tastes and beliefs. A carved seal bearing a unique symbol, a piece of decorative jewelry worn smooth from use. These small finds are powerful reminders that globalization is not a modern invention, but a very ancient human experience. These sailors were the original bridge builders, their daily lives a testament to a world where cultural boundaries were far more fluid than we ever assumed. Their journey forces us to see the Bronze Age not as a collection of isolated kingdoms, but as a single, interconnected community. A gold chalice recovered from the depths was far more than a beautiful object. It was a silent message between kings. The luxury goods found in these shipwrecks, from ivory cosmetic boxes to finely crafted jewelry, were not intended for the marketplace. They were the currency of power and diplomacy, destined for the hands of a tiny, elite class that ruled the Bronze Age world. These items spoke a universal language of status, communicating wealth, refinement, and authority across cultural divides. The raw materials tell an equally compelling story. A shipment of elephant tusks or hippopotamus teeth was not a final product, but a promise of one. They were destined for the workshops of master artisans, who would transform them into custom items, perhaps an intricately carved throne for a Mycenaean warlord or an inlaid game board for an Egyptian prince. This was a world of bespoke luxury, where local craftsmen turned exotic imports into unique symbols of personal prestige. We have written proof of this system in action. The Amarna letters, a cache of clay tablets from the Egyptian royal archives, detail a constant flow of such gifts between the great kings. A pharaoh might send solid gold statues to the ruler of Babylon, and in return receive lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and teams of horses from Mitanni. This was not simple generosity, it was high-stakes geopolitics. Every ivory box and gold ring was a tool to strengthen an alliance, negotiate a peace treaty, or subtly assert one kingdom's dominance over another. The sheer value of this sunken cargo forces us to consider the immense wealth and influence that circulated among these ancient courts. What political dramas unfolded over these very objects? A failed gift could mean a broken alliance, a delayed shipment might spark a war. The artifacts are beautiful, but they are also cold, hard evidence of the political theater that shaped our world 3,000 years ago. A razor's edge still sharp after 3,000 years tells a story no royal inventory ever could. Alongside the king's gold and the queen's jewels, these shipwrecks preserved the humble possessions of the crew, items that whisper directly across the centuries about the reality of life at sea. We find their simple cooking pots, scorched by fires used to prepare meals on a rocky deck. We recover their fishing gear, stone weights that once helped them supplement their rations with fresh catch from the open ocean. Imagine the long, monotonous days between ports, the crew whiling away the hours with games played on a carved wooden board. Their game pieces, simple stones or clay discs, scattered across the seabed where they fell. These are not the artifacts of high diplomacy, but of human endurance. The food remains are particularly telling. Containers held stores of almonds, figs, olives, and pomegranates, a practical and nutritious diet that provided sustenance for weeks under the sun. This was their shipboard reality, a life of hard work punctuated by small comforts and simple pastimes. A wooden comb, its teeth still spaced evenly, speaks to a desire for cleanliness and order amidst the chaos of a long voyage. A bronze razor, a personal possession that required care and maintenance, hints at the small rituals of grooming that maintained a sense of normalcy and identity far from home. These objects do more than just complete an archaeological inventory. They shatter the anonymity of the past. They force us to see the individual faces behind the grand economic network, the men who laughed, gambled, cooked their meals, and cared for their appearance while navigating a vast and unpredictable sea. Their daily concerns were not so different from our own, a powerful reminder that history is built not only on the edicts of pharaohs but on the backs and in the hearts of ordinary people. This connection across time makes their ultimate fate not just a historical event but a profoundly human story. That 1 ton of tin on the Uluburun ship was more valuable than gold. Without it, the 10 tons of copper beside it was just a soft, useless metal. The creation of bronze, the very alloy that named an entire era, hinged on this one critical ingredient, and its origins were one of history's greatest puzzles. For a long time, scholars had no earthly idea where the great Bronze Age kingdoms got their tin. The Mediterranean lands had ample copper, but tin deposits were vanishingly rare, a geological fluke that made the metal impossibly precious. The answer finally surfaced from the seabed. By analyzing the unique chemical fingerprint, the isotopic signature, of the tin ingots from the Uluburun wreck, researchers could trace them back to their source. The results were staggering. This tin did not come from a nearby mine. Its trail led east over deserts and mountains, all the way to the distant highlands of Afghanistan. Just let that sink in for a moment. A mineral mine deep in Central Asia was loaded onto ships sailing the Mediterranean over 3,000 years ago. This was not a casual trade. It was a supply chain of epic proportions, a logistical miracle that stretched for thousands of miles. The journey would have been a multi-stage relay. Caravans of donkeys or camels carried the heavy metal ingots across the formidable landscapes of Iran and Mesopotamia. At some port on the Levantine coast, perhaps in a city like Ugarit, the tin was finally transferred to a sea-going vessel like the Uluburun ship, destined for the royal workshops of the Mycenaeans or the Hittites. This immense distance instantly transformed tin into a strategic resource, a commodity so vital that entire economies depended on its steady flow. Whoever controlled a segment of this route, the mountain passes, the river crossings, the port cities, wielded immense power and wealth. They were the middlemen of the ancient world, the indispensable link between supply and demand. The relentless quest for tin forced kingdoms to look far beyond their own borders, fostering diplomacy with distant powers and undoubtedly sparking conflicts when those fragile supply lines were threatened. It was a geopolitical game where the prize was not land or glory, but the fundamental ingredient for weapons, tools, and the very progress of civilization. In many ways, the Bronze Age world was bound together not by ideas, but by a desperate, shared need for a rare metal found only at the very edge of the known world. The sheer weight of that copper tells a story of industrial might. 10 tons of oxide ingots stacked in the Uluburun ship's hull did not simply appear. They were the output of an entire island operating as a single, massive factory. That island was Cyprus, known to the ancients as Alashiya, and its name was synonymous with copper itself. The iconic oxide shape of its ingots was the universal stamp of quality, a brand recognized from the Nile Delta to the Aegean Sea. These were not just lumps of raw metal, they were a standardized unit of trade, a form of currency that held its value across the known world. Each one was cast in a specific weight, designed with protruding handles so they could be easily carried on poles by teams of men, loaded and unloaded from ships with practiced efficiency. This was a system built for volume and speed, a clear sign of an economy scaling up to meet an insatiable international demand. The mines of Cyprus were not small pits dug by a few villagers. They were extensive underground networks with shafts and galleries reaching deep into the earth. Furnaces dotted the landscape, their fires burning day and night to smelt the raw ore into pure, transportable copper. This level of organized production required a sophisticated society, one with managers to oversee the labor, scribes to record the output, and merchants to negotiate its sale. Cyprus was not a quiet backwater. It was the undisputed copper hub of the Bronze Age, an economic powerhouse whose product literally built the era. The weapons that armed the Egyptian army, the tools that carved Mycenaean palaces, and the fine statues that adorned Hittite temples all depended on the relentless output of Cypriot mines. This gave the island a form of power that rivaled any great kingdom. Its rulers corresponded as equals with the pharaohs of Egypt, their letters found in the Amarna archives, often discussing the quality and shipment of this vital resource. They wielded a soft power grounded in sheer necessity, for to cut off the copper was to strangle the progress of civilization itself. The next time you see a simple map of the ancient world, do not see Cyprus as a lonely island in a wide sea. See it instead as a pulsing, vibrant heart, pumping the lifeblood of copper through the arteries of trade to every distant shore. Among the heavy metal ingots, another treasure gleamed with a deep, celestial blue. These were not stones or metals, but raw glass ingots, a material as valuable as semi-precious gems in the ancient world. The discovery of these cobalt blue blocks on the Uluburun wreck rewrites the history of technology, revealing a sophisticated glass industry operating at an industrial scale over 3,000 years ago. These ingots were the raw material of luxury, intended to be shipped to distant workshops where master artisans would remelt them and fashion them into exquisite beads, elegant vessels, and delicate inlays for royal furniture and jewelry. This was not a cottage craft, it was a full-blown manufacturing process, with specific regions specializing in the production of the raw material itself. Chemical analysis points to the ingots originating in the great technological centers of the age, either Mesopotamia or Egypt. This means the brilliant blue glass started its life in a specialized furnace in one kingdom, was shipped as a standardized commodity across the sea, and was finally transformed into a finished work of art in another. This is a powerful example of an ancient global supply chain, not just for raw materials, but for advanced technology itself. The very knowledge of how to create this high-quality glass was a closely guarded secret, a form of intellectual property that gave these regions a powerful economic advantage. The trade in raw glass allowed for an incredible cross-pollination of styles. A Mycenaean craftsman in Greece could now work with the same high-quality Egyptian blue glass as an artisan in Canaan, leading to objects that blended local artistic tastes with imported materials. This early globalization meant that a necklace found in a tomb in Cyprus could have a design inspired by Mesopotamia, made from glass manufactured in Egypt. The presence of these glass ingots, sitting side by side with copper and ivory, completes our picture of the Bronze Age luxury market. It was not a simple exchange of natural resources, but a complex web of raw material extraction, technological production, and artistic creation that spanned the entire known world. This intertwined relationship between innovation and commerce fueled a cultural conversation that echoed from royal courts to the workshops of humble artisans, forever changing the aesthetic landscape of the ancient Mediterranean. A gleaming hippopotamus tusk resting for millennia on the seafloor was more than just cargo. It was a blank canvas for an ancient master craftsman, a symbol of power waiting to be unlocked. The Uluburun ship carried not only raw tusks from both elephants and the more aquatic hippos, but also exquisitely finished ivory objects, proving that this exotic material was traded at every stage of its transformation. In the royal workshops of Mycenae, Egypt, and the Levant, these organic treasures were carefully carved into breathtaking works of art. Imagine an ornate cosmetic box, its lid adorned with a scene of leaping griffins, a mythical creature popular in Near Eastern art, yet carved in a style that was distinctly Mycenaean Greek. This was the true power of the trade network. It was not just an exchange of goods, but a fusion of ideas. An artisan in Greece could be inspired by a Mesopotamian myth, using African ivory to create a luxury item for a local chieftain. This cultural blending resulted in objects of stunning hybrid beauty, artifacts that cannot be pinned to a single culture, but instead represent the birth of a shared international artistic language. The very sources of this ivory reveal the staggering scale of these connections. While Syrian elephants were still a possibility, the sheer volume of tusks points to a supply chain reaching deep into the African continent. This means a commodity from the heart of Africa was being shipped to the palaces of the Aegean, a journey that required established contacts, trusted middlemen, and a clear route stretching across unimaginable distances. This demand for ivory and other exotic materials like ebony and ostrich eggs was a powerful engine for exploration. It pushed merchants to venture beyond known horizons, to establish diplomatic and economic ties with distant, unfamiliar peoples, all to satisfy the insatiable appetite for beauty and status back home. The recovery of these items from the seabed provides the physical, undeniable evidence for the luxury described in ancient texts and depicted on tomb walls. It confirms that the magnificent ivory, inlaid furniture, and intricate carvings shown in Egyptian reliefs were not just artistic fantasies, but real objects circulating on ships like this one. This ancient desire for rare and beautiful things, a desire that drove global connections then, is a thread that runs unbroken through human history, connecting our modern world directly to the ambitions of a Bronze Age king. A merchant's most trusted tool was not his ship, but his set of weights. On the Uluburun wreck, nestled among the luxury goods, archaeologists recovered something far more valuable for understanding the ancient economy: carefully crafted stone and metal weights. These were not random stones, they were precision instruments, carved into geometric shapes like cubes and spheres, each one conforming to an established standard of measurement. Some were calibrated to the Syrian shekel, while others matched the Egyptian Deban system. This was the practical backbone of international trade, a universally accepted language of value that allowed a merchant from the Levant to conduct a fair transaction with a Mycenaean prince or an Egyptian official. The presence of multiple sets on a single ship is profoundly telling. It means the merchant and his crew had to be human calculators, fluent in converting between different units of weight and value as easily as we might convert currencies today. This was not a barter system based on guesswork. It was a sophisticated economy built on trust and mutual agreement. The very existence of these standards implies a remarkable level of cooperation across cultural lines. Competing kingdoms might have waged war on land, but at sea, in the bustling ports, a shared commercial logic prevailed. A shekel of silver in Syria had to be equivalent in value to a deban of copper in Egypt for this entire intricate network to function. These small, unassuming weights are the ultimate proof of this integration. They are the silent contracts of the Bronze Age, tangible evidence that these ancient mariners operated within a framework of agreed-upon rules that transcended political borders and linguistic barriers. They force us to see these merchants not just as transporters of goods, but as cultural diplomats and economic innovators. the architects of a system so robust its basic principles of standardized value still underpin our global economy today. A single shipwreck is a data point, but a scatter of them across the seabed begins to trace a map. By plotting the locations of these submerged time capsules and analyzing their mixed cargoes, archaeologists can finally chart the invisible highways these Bronze Age ships traveled. The journey was a careful dance between caution and courage. Wherever possible, a prudent captain would keep the coastline in sight, navigating by a mental catalogue of headlands, river mouths, and distinctive mountain peaks. This was the safest path, offering opportunities for fresh water and shelter from sudden Mediterranean storms. But the cargo tells us these sailors were not merely coastal hoppers. The direct presence of Cypriot copper and Mycenaean pottery on the same ship points to daring open-water crossings, straight-line voyages across the deep blue between Cyprus, Crete, and the Anatolian coast. These were the interstates of the ancient world, risky shortcuts that shaved weeks off a journey but required immense skill and nerve. Success depended on a deep, almost instinctual knowledge passed from father to son, an oral encyclopedia of the sea itself. They learned to read the seasonal winds, harnessing the steady summer meltemi to drive them eastward, and they memorized the complex currents that could either speed a voyage or dash a ship against unseen rocks. At night, when the coastline vanished into darkness, they steered by the silent, fixed patterns of the stars, their celestial road maps guiding them across a trackless void. This accumulated wisdom was their most precious cargo, more valuable than any ingot, for it was the key that unlocked the entire network. The distribution of wreck sites and artifacts now lets us see this web clearly. We can trace the copper from the mines of Cyprus flowing westward to the palaces of Greece, while the finished goods and exotic luxuries from the east traveled in the opposite direction. This was a circulatory system, with resources pulsing from places like Cyprus to the great consumer capitals in Egypt and the Aegean. To comprehend these voyages is to understand the sheer logistical genius of these ancient traders. They coordinated multi-stage journeys spanning thousands of miles without a single chart, compass, or written sailing manual. Their map was etched into their memory. Their compass was the sun and stars, and their success was a testament to a daring that connected the ancient world into a single, thriving community. How did a queen's lost seal end up at the bottom of the sea? That golden scarab bearing Nefertiti's name was more than just a beautiful artifact. It was a historical timestamp. Pinpointing the exact year a ship sank is not guesswork. It is a scientific puzzle solved by cross-referencing multiple lines of evidence. Radiocarbon dating provides the first major clue. By measuring the decay of a specific type of carbon in a piece of wooden hull or a rope fragment, scientists can determine its age within a range of several decades. This gives a broad, reliable time frame, but archaeologists strive for even greater precision. For that, they turn to dendrochronology, the study of tree rings. Every tree records its life in its rings, with patterns of wide and narrow growth that correspond to years of good rain or punishing drought. By matching the unique pattern from a ship's timber to a master chronology of tree rings from the region, researchers can often identify the exact year the tree was cut down. This tells us the ship was built after that date, dramatically narrowing the window for its final voyage. On the Uluburun wreck, this method suggested the ship was constructed around 1300 BC, a date that aligned perfectly with the historical period of Nefertiti. The artifacts themselves provide the final confirmation. Specialists in pottery typology study the shapes, decorations, and materials of the ceramic jars and cups found in the cargo. These styles changed over time, much like car designs or fashion trends do today. by comparing the ship's pottery to identical types found in well-dated ruins on land, like a destroyed palace or a sealed tomb. They can lock in the date with remarkable confidence. This convergence of science and history transforms a scattered collection on the seafloor into a single, datable event. We are no longer looking at a random disaster, but a specific ship that sank in a specific year, carrying a specific Queen's seal. This chronological precision allows us to connect the dots in a powerful new way. We can now ask if a ship's disappearance coincided with a recorded period of political unrest, or if a sudden gap in the tin supply mentioned in royal letters matches the year a vessel laden with the precious metal vanished. The scientific rigor behind dating these wrecks ensures that the incredible story we are piecing together is not a fanciful legend, but a chapter of human history written in wood, stone, and metal, and grounded in undeniable evidence. A golden age cannot last forever. The very networks that created such incredible prosperity became the same arteries through which crisis could spread. Around 1200 BC, the entire intricate system of the late Bronze Age began to shatter. The great palaces of the Mycenaeans went up in flames. The Hittite Empire in Anatolia vanished from history. Egypt barely survived, fending off mysterious invaders it called the Sea Peoples. This was not a slow decline, but a swift and catastrophic collapse that plunged the Mediterranean into a dark age. For decades, historians have debated the causes, pointing to climate change, famine, and mass migrations. But what do the shipwrecks, our most direct witnesses, have to say about this final, chaotic chapter? The Gelidonya wreck, which sank right at the edge of this collapse, tells a very different story from the opulent Uluburun ship that preceded it by a century. Its cargo was smaller, more practical, and less diverse. It carried the raw copper and tin for bronze, but where were the royal gifts, the ivory, the golden scarabs? This ship seems to represent a world where the great royal monopolies had broken down, replaced by smaller, more vulnerable merchants operating in an increasingly dangerous and unstable world. Some theorists suggest the seas became infested with pirates as centralized power crumbled and naval patrols disappeared. Others see evidence of economic desperation in these smaller, less valuable cargoes, as if the trade in true luxuries had simply ceased to be viable. The shipwrecks from this horizon do not show a single dramatic cause of death, like a massive invasion fleet sunk in battle. Instead, they show a pattern of disruption, a gradual fraying of the threads that once bound the world together. Cargoes become less international, hinting at shorter, more cautious trade routes as the long, daring voyages across open water became too perilous. The flow of tin, that vital ingredient from Afghanistan, appears to have been severely disrupted, perhaps even severed entirely. Imagine the consequences. Without a steady supply of tin, you cannot make new bronze. Weapons cannot be replaced, tools cannot be forged, and the entire technological foundation of society begins to crumble. The shipwrecks provide the physical, sunken proof of this breakdown in logistics. They are the tangible evidence of connectivity lost, of a globalized world turning inward and local once more. While a single sunken ship cannot explain the collapse of empires, this collection of wrecks acts like a black box recorder from a fallen civilization. They record the last desperate voyages before the lights went out. They show us that the end did not arrive in one cataclysmic event, but as a cascade of failures where trade routes faltered, trust evaporated, and the brave mariners who once connected continents found themselves sailing into a gathering storm with no safe harbor in sight. Recovering a 3,000-year-old artifact is only the first step in a race against time. The moment an object is lifted from the saltwater that has preserved it for millennia, a new and dangerous clock begins ticking. Materials like wood, metal, and ivory, stable for centuries on the dark seafloor, can begin to crumble and disintegrate within hours of exposure to the air. The very water that protected them is now their enemy, as corrosive salts have saturated every fiber and pore. To save these treasures, they must undergo a second scientific rescue mission far more delicate than their recovery from the depths. This process begins with desalination, a painstakingly slow bath in fresh water that gradually draws out the destructive salts. For a massive wooden hull fragment, this can mean years in a custom-built tank, with the water changed meticulously to monitor the salt levels until they are gone. But removing the salt is only half the battle. The real challenge is stabilizing the object's very structure. Waterlogged wood, for instance, has lost its original cellular strength. If left to dry naturally, it would warp and shrink into an unrecognizable splinter. Instead, conservators use a method like polyethylene glycol treatment, where the water inside the wood is slowly replaced with a waxy substance that hardens, supporting the fragile cells from within and allowing the object to retain its shape. This is not a quick procedure. It is a commitment that can span decades, a silent partnership between the modern conservator and the ancient artisan. The Uluburun ship's timbers are still being cared for today, decades after their discovery, housed in special conservation labs where their environment is constantly monitored. This work demands an interdisciplinary ballet where archaeologists provide historical context, chemists analyze material composition, and conservators apply their meticulous hands-on skills. Why go to such extraordinary lengths for a piece of waterlogged wood or a corroded lump of metal? Because these are not just objects, they are the primary documents of a lost world, and their physical integrity is everything. A warped piece of hull can mislead us about ancient shipbuilding techniques. A corroded sword loses the fine details of its craftsmanship. The painstaking work of conservation is a pledge to the future, an assurance that these silent witnesses will be able to tell their stories accurately for generations to come. It is a profound reminder of the fragility of our shared human heritage and the quiet, dedicated effort required to protect it from vanishing a second time. The golden scarab of Nefertiti and the cargo of the Uluburun ship feel like something straight out of an epic poem. For generations, we read Homer's Odyssey as a fantastical adventure, a story of cunning heroes and monstrous creatures. Yet the archaeological record now suggests these myths were woven from threads of real memory. When Homer describes Phoenician traders as clever and cunning, men who sailed the wine-dark sea with a hold full of treasures, he is not inventing a character. He is describing the very merchants who crewed ships like the one at Uluburun. Their personal kits a jumble of cultures, their weights calibrated for trade from Egypt to Greece. The myth captures the essence of these multicultural intermediaries, the real-life global citizens who connected the ancient world. But the same physical evidence that confirms parts of these stories also corrects them. The epic poems and royal inscriptions often focus on grand gestures, royal gifts exchanged between great kings. The shipwrecks reveal a truth that is both more mundane and far more revolutionary. This was not just a trickle of diplomacy between palaces. It was a flood of commerce, a constant churn of independent merchants carrying everything from bulk raw metal to everyday olives, operating on a scale the myths never hint at. The legends give us the glamour of a single golden cup, but the archaeology shows us the 10 tons of copper it was traded for. This grounding in physical reality transforms our understanding of the ancient world. We can now read an Egyptian tale of a voyage to the fabled land of Punt for incense and ebony, and understand it not as a singular, heroic quest, but as one documented trip in a vast and routine network. The mythological sea monsters that threatened sailors were likely literary representations of very real and terrifying dangers, from sudden squalls to the sheer, existential fear of the open ocean. This synthesis does not diminish the power of the stories. Instead, it enriches them. It shows us that ancient storytellers were not just inventing fantasies. They were processing their world, blending observed reality with symbolic meaning to create narratives that made sense of a complex and interconnected existence. The shipwrecks provide the anchor, the tangible proof that lets us separate the historical wave from the poetic foam, giving us a dual lens through which to view the Bronze Age, one eye on the artifact and the other on the epic. The old history books are being rewritten one artifact at a time. For generations, the story of the Bronze Age was a tale of walled palaces and warring kings, a world where power was measured in land and soldiers, and long-distance contact was a rare royal affair. The shipwreck archives have systematically dismantled that entire narrative. They have not merely added a footnote to history, they have ripped out the old chapter and replaced it with one of astonishing complexity and connection. The traditional view of palace-controlled economies, where every transaction was dictated by a central bureaucrat, simply cannot account for the sheer volume and variety of goods found on these ships. The evidence points instead to a vibrant, competitive private sector, where entrepreneurial merchants operated with a degree of independence, connecting producers with consumers across vast distances. This was not a trickle of state-sponsored gifts, but a flood of commercial activity. The scale of this integration is breathtaking. The economic interdependence we see in these cargoes, where a kingdom's bronze supply depended on mines in Cyprus and tin from Afghanistan, rivals the global trade networks of the early modern era. This forces a complete re-evaluation of what ancient societies were capable of achieving. The new narrative that emerges is not one of isolation and constant conflict, but of innovation driven by necessity, of cooperation across cultural lines, and of a profound exchange of ideas that traveled alongside the raw materials. Textbooks have been updated to show a map crisscrossed with sea routes, a world where a Mycenaean pot could be found in a Canaanite home, and an Egyptian amulet could be lost off the coast of Turkey. This paradigm shift is a powerful lesson in intellectual humility. It demonstrates that our understanding of the past is not fixed, but is a story constantly refined by new evidence. The silent witnesses on the seafloor urge us to remain open, to question our assumptions, and to always expect the next discovery to reveal another layer of our shared and surprisingly global human story. A shipwreck is no longer a pile of artifacts waiting to be collected. It is a complex three-dimensional crime scene, and modern technology gives archaeologists the tools to read it like an open book. The first step is finding these sites, a task once left to the sheer luck of sponge divers. Today, side-scan sonar and magnetometers are the eyes that pierce the deep. A research vessel tows these devices, which send out acoustic pulses or measure magnetic anomalies, painting a detailed picture of the seafloor across vast, previously uncharted territories. They can identify promising shapes, like the distinct outline of an amphora pile or the magnetic signature of a metal-rich cargo, narrowing the search from thousands of square miles to a few precise targets. Once a site is located, the real magic of non-invasive archaeology begins. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, are now the workhorses of the deep. These robotic submarines, equipped with high-definition cameras and delicate manipulator arms, can hover over a wreck for hours, beaming a live video feed to scientists on a ship far above. They allow for meticulous survey and delicate recovery without a single human diver ever needing to disturb the fragile site. But perhaps the most transformative tool is three-dimensional photogrammetry. An ROV or diver will take thousands of overlapping photographs of the wreck from every possible angle. Powerful software then stitches these images together, calculating the precise distance between points to generate a perfect, photorealistic digital twin of the entire site. This model can be rotated, zoomed into, and even virtually flown through. An archaeologist in an office can examine the exact position of a single pottery shard relative to a copper ingot, preserving the spatial relationships that tell the story of the ship's final moments. This digital preservation is a form of time travel, freezing the wreck in a pristine state for endless future study, long after the original artifacts have been raised and conserved. The analysis continues in the laboratory with techniques that would seem like pure science fiction to George Bass and his pioneering team. We can now extract ancient DNA from the microscopic residues left inside storage jars, identifying the specific type of olive oil, wine, or resin they once held. This tells us not just what they carried, but the flavor of their trade. Isotopic analysis of metals has become incredibly precise. By studying the unique chemical signature of a copper ingot, scientists can often pinpoint the exact Cypriot mine it came from. For tin, this isotopic fingerprint can distinguish between sources in Afghanistan, Cornwall, or elsewhere, finally mapping those elusive supply routes with scientific certainty. This technological leap extends beyond the academic sphere, democratizing discovery for a global audience. The same three-dimensional models used for research can be transformed into immersive virtual reality experiences. You can put on a headset and find yourself floating beside the Uluburun ship as it rests on the seabed, watching as a digital reconstruction overlays the scattered cargo, showing you how it all fit together in the hold. This public engagement is crucial, turning abstract history into a tangible, emotional experience that inspires the next generation of explorers. The integration of this cutting-edge science with the patient, methodical work of traditional archaeology means that every new discovery is no longer a single data point, but a dense web of interconnected information. Each artifact now comes with a backstory written in its very atoms, a story we have only just learned how to read. A single worn leather sandal, preserved in the seabed's cold embrace, tells a story no royal inventory ever could. This was not a ceremonial object, but a piece of everyday life, its soul shaped by the countless steps its owner took across a rocking wooden deck. Beside it, a collection of simple gaming pieces, carved from stone and clay, speaks of long, monotonous voyages where sailors sought distraction from the perilous sea. These are the artifacts that truly bridge the millennia, transforming abstract historical figures into relatable human beings. We can almost hear the laughter and friendly arguments over a board game, a moment of normalcy carved out between the grueling work and the ever-present fear of storms. A personal seal, intricately carved with a unique symbol and perhaps a name, is particularly powerful. It is a claim of identity, a mark of ownership that declares, "I existed. I was here, this was mine." In a world where individuals are so often lost to time, these seals are a defiant whisper of a specific person, a merchant or a sailor whose story was cut short on that final voyage. What dreams were they carrying across the water? Were they hoping to return home with wealth to build a better life, or were they simply trying to survive one more trading season? A beautiful gold chalice tucked away carefully might not have been a royal gift at all. Perhaps it was a father's cherished purchase, intended for his daughter's wedding, a tangible promise of a future he would never see. This shift in perspective, from the grand political narrative to the intimate human scale, changes everything. It reminds us that the Bronze Age was not just an era of empires and economic systems. but a period filled with individuals who experienced hope, boredom, fear, and camaraderie in ways we can immediately understand. Their resilience in the face of a vast and unpredictable ocean mirrors our own struggles against the uncertainties of life. By reconstructing these personal stories, we do more than just add color to the data. We weave an emotional thread that connects our modern hearts directly to the past. This connection makes their ultimate fate not merely a historical event, but a profoundly human story of adventure and loss, reminding us that the drive to explore and connect is one of the oldest and most enduring parts of our shared humanity. That worn leather sandal is not just an artifact, it is a person's story. And with every story we raise from the deep, we inherit a profound responsibility. Who truly owns these sunken treasures? The debate over cultural heritage is as layered as the sediment protecting these wrecks. On one side, there is the nation whose coastal waters cradle the site, a country that may feel a direct ancestral link to the cargo and its story. On another, there are the international museums and institutions with the resources and expertise to conserve and display these fragile objects for a global audience. And then there are the descendant communities, the modern populations whose cultural identity is intertwined with the ancient mariners who sailed these ships. This is not a simple question with a single answer. It is a complex ethical landscape that archaeologists must navigate with care and respect. The goal of modern archaeology is shifting from mere acquisition to collaboration. This means working hand in hand with local governments, training and involving local divers and researchers, and ensuring that the knowledge and benefits of discovery are shared equitably. It is about listening to community voices to understand what these finds mean to them, transforming a foreign excavation into a shared project of cultural rediscovery. The 2001 UNESCO Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage provides a crucial ethical compass for this work. Its core principle is that underwater heritage should be preserved in place as a first option, and that any recovery must be done to the highest scientific standards, not for commercial gain. This international framework is a powerful tool against looters who would rip artifacts from their context for a quick sale on the black market, forever destroying the historical narrative. When a looted vase appears in a private collection, its financial value is preserved, but its story is lost. We may never know which ship it sailed on, what else was in the hold, or what its journey can teach us about the ancient world. The real treasure is not the object itself, but the information it holds when its context is meticulously recorded. Deciding where these artifacts ultimately belong is another delicate balance. Should a Phoenician ship's cargo found off Italy go to an Italian museum, or should it travel to Lebanon, the modern descendant of Phoenicia? There are compelling arguments for both. Local display allows people to connect with history found on their doorstep, while international exhibitions foster a global appreciation of our shared human past. The most successful outcomes often involve partnerships where replicas are created, exhibits are shared, and digital models make the wrecks accessible to anyone with an internet connection. This ethical approach ensures that we are not just takers but guardians. We are temporary custodians of a past that belongs to all of humanity. The ultimate question is not what we can take from these sites, but what we can learn from them and how we can protect their stories for the children of the future. The true measure of our discovery will be the legacy of respect we leave behind. The vast floor of the Mediterranean is still a mostly unread page. For every shipwreck we have found, there are likely dozens, perhaps hundreds, still hidden by sand and depth, each one a potential key to another locked door in our understanding of the Bronze Age. The technology that revealed the Uluburun wreck is already being surpassed by a new generation of robotic explorers and sensors capable of scanning deeper and with greater clarity than ever before. These tools open the possibility of finding wrecks from even earlier periods, from the very dawn of seafaring, which could show us the first tentative steps that built the global network we now know existed. Imagine discovering a vessel from 1,000 years before the Uluburun, its simpler cargo illustrating the raw beginnings of this interconnected world. The established map of trade routes is also ripe for challenge. While most discoveries have been in the eastern Mediterranean, what about ships that ventured beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the stormy Atlantic? A wreck off the coast of Portugal or Britain carrying Bronze Age goods could prove that this maritime web was even more extensive than we currently dare to believe. Such a find would force us to extend our maps westward, incorporating the Atlantic coasts of Europe into the heart of the Bronze Age economy. And then there are the more speculative frontier ideas. The possibility of transoceanic contact, of a single storm-blown ship reaching the Americas, is a tantalizing thought, but one that the scientific community rightly treats with extreme caution. For such a revolutionary claim to be accepted, the evidence would need to be undeniable: a cargo of old-world artifacts in a securely dated New World context, something no credible discovery has yet provided. The real and immediate excitement, however, lies not only in finding new wrecks but in re-examining the treasures we already have. The artifacts recovered decades ago are now being subjected to scientific techniques that did not exist at the time of their discovery. We can now analyze the microscopic residues inside an empty pottery jar and determine if it held wine, olive oil, or a rare resin. We can take a tiny sample of a copper ingot and trace it not just to Cyprus, but to a single, specific mine on the island. Each artifact is a locked box of information, and we are only now forging the keys to open them all. This constant evolution makes underwater archaeology one of the most dynamic fields of science. Every expedition that sets sail carries the potential for a discovery that could, once again, force every textbook to be rewritten. The past is not a static, finished story. It is a living narrative waiting for its next chapter to be raised from the deep. The shipwreck archives of the Bronze Age have redrawn the map of human history. These underwater time capsules provide undeniable physical proof of a world woven together by trade, a Mediterranean not of isolated kingdoms but of a single, pulsating network. From the royal gold on the Uluburun to the pragmatic metal ingots at Gelidonya, every artifact is a testament to a forgotten age of globalization. This evidence challenges the very foundation of our old stories, forcing us to abandon the idea of a simple, disconnected past. We must now see history as a complex web of human interaction, where the fate of an empire in Egypt could be linked to a tin mine in distant Afghanistan. The courage of those ancient mariners navigating by the stars across treacherous seas reflects an enduring human spirit of exploration and innovation that still drives us today. Their story is an invitation to look deeper, to question the narratives we have always accepted, and to wonder what other chapters of our shared past are still waiting, silent and patient beneath the waves. If this journey into a lost world of connection has captivated you, there are countless more mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest puzzles, and share your own thoughts on these sunken treasures in the comments below.